In the dim candlelight of a forgotten laboratory, an ancient alchemist scrawled these cryptic words into his leather-bound journal, "As above, so below." This wasn't just a phrase, it was a key to unlocking the universe's deepest secrets. For centuries, these pioneers of the mysterious sciences worked in secrecy, surrounded by bubbling flasks, strange symbols, and manuscripts filled with codes no one could decipher. They weren't just mixing chemicals, they were chasing something far grander, the hidden truths that bound the physical world to the spiritual. Some called them madmen. Others whispered they discovered the impossible. But what really happened inside those shadowy workshops? What forbidden knowledge did they take to their graves? Today, we're stepping into their world, unraveling the lost legacies of history's most enigmatic minds. From legendary figures whose names echo through time to obscure masters whose breakthroughs vanished without a trace. And our journey begins with a man whose life blurs the line between history and myth. Deep in the sands of ancient Egypt and the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia, the first whispers of alchemy took shape. Long before laboratories and glassware, early practitioners gazed into their crucibles with a vision that transcended mere chemistry. They weren't just trying to turn lead into gold, they were searching for something far more profound. To them, metals were alive, evolving toward perfection, just like the human soul. This idea of transformation of both matter and spirit became the heartbeat of alchemy, pulsing through temples and workshops for centuries. By the time these secrets reached the Greeks and Romans, they merged with the mystical teachings of Hermetic philosophy. At the center of it all stood Hermes Trismegistus, a figure so shrouded in legend that some claimed he was a god walking among men. His supposed masterpiece, the Emerald Tablet, held just a few lines of cryptic wisdom, yet its words, like "as above, so below," became the foundation of alchemical thought. This wasn't just about changing metal, it was about uncovering the hidden threads connecting the cosmos, the earth, and the human spirit. What's fascinating is how alchemy refused to fit neatly into the boxes we use today. Was it science? Was it magic? The truth is, it was both. Every experiment was a meditation, every substance a symbol. The alchemist's workshop wasn't just a place of fire and smoke. It was a sacred space where the mysteries of creation played out in flasks and furnaces. And as these ideas traveled, they found new life in distant lands, sparking revolutions in thought that would echo through history. Soon, the torch would pass to another civilization, where scholars would refine these ancient secrets under the blazing sun of the Islamic Golden Age. Under the vast skies of Baghdad and Cordoba, a new chapter of alchemy unfolded, one where meticulous experimentation met profound spiritual insight. While many think of alchemy as a European obsession, its golden age truly blossomed in the Islamic world. Here, scholars didn't merely preserve ancient wisdom, they revolutionized it. Take Jabir ibn Hayyan, known in the West as Jabir. This 9th century polymath wasn't content with cryptic riddles. He insisted on precision, documenting every step of his experiments as if writing a manual for the ages. His workshops buzzed with innovation, alembics for distillation, crucibles for purification, and groundbreaking discoveries like sulfuric and nitric acid substances that would become the backbone of modern chemistry. Yet for Jabir and his peers, science and symbolism were inseparable. When they distilled rosewater or purified metals, they saw echoes of the soul's journey, a fusion of matter and meaning. Their texts wove together chemical recipes with astrological diagrams and coded allegories, suggesting that transforming lead into gold was just as much about inner enlightenment as laboratory triumph. This duality fascinated later thinkers, especially when their translated works reached medieval Europe, where alchemists pored over Arabic manuscripts like treasure maps. Among those who inherited this legacy was a name that would eclipse even the greatest scholars, Nicolas Flamel. Unlike Jabir, Flamel wasn't a scientist but a humble scribe, or so the story goes. His sudden wealth and rumored immortality sparked whispers that he'd unlocked the ultimate alchemical secret. But was Flamel a true adept or merely a man myth outgrew? The answer lies in the shadows between history and legend, where the line between alchemy's triumphs and its tantalizing mysteries blurs beyond recognition. Nicolas Flamel's story is the kind that makes history and legend impossible to untangle. On paper, he was just a Parisian bookseller in the 14th century, a modest man who copied manuscripts for a living. But centuries after his death, rumors erupted that he had cracked alchemy's greatest secret. Whispers claimed his sudden wealth came not from trade, but from the fabled philosopher's stone, that legendary substance said to turn base metals into gold and grant eternal life. Even wilder tales insisted Flamel and his wife, Paracelsus, never truly died but vanished into immortality. So how did a quiet scribe become the most famous alchemist in European lore? The answer lies in a strange twist of history. Flamel did leave behind a written work, a cryptic book filled with bizarre illustrations, serpents swallowing their tails, kings rising from graves, and celestial bodies raining gold. To the untrained eye, it looked like medieval fantasy, but to alchemists, these images were layered with hidden meaning. Some believe the drawings were step-by-step instructions for the great work, the alchemical process of purification and transcendence. Others argue Flamel never understood the text himself, merely copying an older, more mysterious manuscript he acquired. What's undeniable is the timing. Shortly after his death, reports surfaced of a man matching Flamel's description appearing in far-off places, decades or even centuries later. An 18th century opera claimed he'd been spotted in a Parisian theater long after his supposed burial. Even Harry Potter borrowed the myth, casting Flamel as an immortal guardian of the Sorcerer's Stone. But the truth, historical records show a real Nicolas Flamel did exist. His tombstone, still in Paris, bears no hints of alchemy, just the name of a man who died like any other. So why did the legend outgrow the man? Perhaps because Flamel became a blank slate, a stand-in for every alchemist who dreamed of conquering death. His story blurred the line between fact and fantasy so completely that even today, scholars debate whether he was a genuine adept or just a medieval everyman mythologized by later generations. But if Flamel represents alchemy's tantalizing promise, then his successor embodies its dangers. Enter Paracelsus, the brilliant, brash figure who took the quest for hidden knowledge to its darkest edge. If alchemy had a wild card, a figure who embodied its fiery, untamable spirit, it would be Paracelsus. Born in Switzerland in the late 15th century, this brash, swaggering genius stormed through Europe like a thunderclap, overturning medical conventions with the fury of a man who believed nature held cures far beyond stale medieval textbooks. Picture a physician who tossed Galen's ancient teachings into bonfires, who treated peasants and princes alike with remedies brewed from metals and minerals, and who declared that true medicine must harmonize body, spirit, and cosmos. This wasn't just rebellion, it was revolution. At the heart of Paracelsus's radical approach lay his theory of the tria prima, the three primes, salt, sulfur, and mercury. To him, these weren't just substances but cosmic principles governing all matter and life. Salt represented stability, sulfur the fiery spark of transformation, and mercury the elusive, fluid force of connection. Sickness, he argued, arose when these elements fell out of balance. A fever wasn't just an ailment to be bled away, it was sulfur's flame raging unchecked. His treatments, alchemical elixirs, tinctures of metals like antimony, and even early forms of chemotherapy centuries ahead of their time, his methods were as dramatic as his theories. In one famous incident, Paracelsus allegedly cured a leg ulcer deemed hopeless by conventional doctors using a mercury-based salve. Another tale describes him saving a town from plague with a mysterious arcanum, a potent remedy whispered to contain gold, the ultimate purified metal. Yet for every triumph there was controversy. His rivals called him a charlatan. His students scribbled down his every word as gospel. And when he died under mysterious circumstances in his 40s, rumors swirled that he'd left behind a manuscript revealing the secret of eternal life, one that vanished, like so much of alchemy's lore, into the shadows. Paracelsus's legacy, though, refused to fade. His insistence that chemistry belonged in medicine laid groundwork for modern pharmacology. Even his holistic vision that health required treating the whole person, not just symptoms, echoes in today's integrative therapies. But perhaps his greatest impact was intangible. The idea that knowledge should never be stagnant, that daring to question orthodoxy could rewrite the boundaries of science. And it was this spirit of hidden knowledge passed down through secretive networks that would soon inspire one of history's most enigmatic movements, the Rosicrucians. Their manifestos, bursting with alchemical symbols and promises of divine wisdom, would turn the quest for transformation into something even grander, a brotherhood's sacred mission. Just when alchemy seemed to fade into history's shadows, a new enigma erupted onto the scene, one wrapped in cryptic manifestos, secret brotherhoods, and whispers of a coming enlightenment. In the early 1600s, two mysterious texts appeared almost out of nowhere, the Fama Fraternitatis and the Confessio Fraternitatis, both claiming to be declarations from a hidden order called the Rosicrucians. These weren't just philosophical musings, they were lightning bolts, promising a revolution in science, spirituality, and alchemy. The catch: no one could prove the Rosicrucians even existed. At the heart of the mystery stood Johann Valentin Andreae, a Lutheran scholar whose name surfaced as a likely architect of the manifestos. Some believe he penned them as an elaborate allegory, a call for intellectual and spiritual reform disguised as a secret society's proclamation. Others suspect deeper forces at work, perhaps a real network of adepts operating in the shadows. The manifestos spoke of an invisible college of enlightened minds, masters of alchemy and sacred geometry, preparing humanity for a new age. And then there was the chemical wedding of Christian Rosicrucians, a surreal allegory blending alchemical transformation with Christian mysticism. Picture a 7-day ritual where kings and queens dissolve in glass coffins, only to be resurrected in purified form, a thinly veiled metaphor for the great work itself. The impact of these texts was explosive. Across Europe, thinkers split into factions. Some hailed the Rosicrucians as prophets, others denounced them as heretical tricksters. But their influence seeped into the foundations of later secret societies, particularly Freemasonry, which adopted their symbols and ideals. The Rosicrucian vision of hidden knowledge guiding humanity toward enlightenment became a blueprint for countless occult movements. Yet for all the speculation, one question lingers: were the manifestos a clever hoax, a spiritual call to arms, or the coded revelations of a genuine brotherhood lost to time? As this wave of esoteric intrigue crested, another figure emerged, one who seemed to embody the Rosicrucian ideal of the eternal adept. Enter the Count of Saint Germain, a man whose life was so shrouded in enigma that some doubted he was even human. Court records from 18th century Europe describe him as a polymath who spoke a dozen languages, composed music effortlessly, and most astonishingly claimed to have lived for centuries. When pressed about his past, he dropped tantalizing hints, conversations with ancient philosophers, memories of medieval courts, even knowledge of the lost secrets of alchemy. Unlike Rosicrucian mystics who worked through texts, Saint Germain operated in glittering salons, dazzling aristocrats with his uncanny abilities. He demonstrated alchemical feats like removing flaws from diamonds and producing elixirs rumored to halt aging. Skeptics dismissed him as a charlatan. Admirers whispered he'd inherited the Rosicrucians' deepest secrets. But perhaps his greatest trick was vanishing as mysteriously as he appeared, leaving behind only questions. Was he a time-traveling sage, an immortal alchemist, or simply a masterful illusionist? The answer depends on whom you ask, but his legend, like the manifestos before him, proved that alchemy's allure wasn't just about transforming metals. It was about the eternal human hunger to transcend limits, to touch the divine. And while Saint Germain's story straddles myth and history, his legacy leads us to a pivotal shift, where alchemy's mystical trappings began giving way to something resembling modern science. The Count of Saint Germain didn't just walk into history, he glided in, cloaked in a mystery so thick it still clings to his name centuries later. Here was a man who moved through 18th century Europe like a figure from a forgotten era, dazzling royalty with talents that defied explanation. Kings and queens leaned in as he spoke flawless Italian, ancient Greek, even Sanskrit languages few Europeans knew at the time. Diplomats gaped when he casually corrected their accounts of centuries-old treaties, describing details no textbook recorded. And then there were the jewels. Witnesses swore they saw him take flawed diamonds and with some alchemical secret make them flawless, but his most astonishing claim, that he'd lived for hundreds of years, the whispers only grew wilder. At a dinner in Versailles, he hinted he'd dined with the Queen of Sheba. In Vienna, he let slip memories of advising Roman emperors. Some courtiers dismissed it as theatrics, but others noted eerie consistencies. His hands bore no signs of age. His energy never waned, and he never seemed to eat in public. When pressed, he'd simply smile and redirect the conversation to philosophy or chemistry, dropping cryptic remarks about alchemist, the universal solvent alchemists believed could dissolve anything, even time itself. Historians have pieced together fragments of his life, his close ties to Freemasonry, his role as a spy for French royalty, even patents he filed for revolutionary dyeing techniques. Yet none of this explains the legends. Was he a time traveler, an immortal alchemist, or just a supremely gifted conman who understood the power of mystique? The truth may lie in the way Saint Germain mirrored alchemy's deepest metaphor, the transformation of perception. To those who met him, he wasn't just a man, he became whatever they needed him to be. A sage, a healer, a living myth. His story bled into the secret societies he frequented, where symbols replaced words. Alchemy's language was never literal. A flask of bubbling liquid might represent spiritual purification, just as turning lead to gold mirrored the soul's journey to enlightenment. Saint Germain mastered this code, leaving behind manuscripts filled with arcane diagrams, a puzzle begging to be solved. Some believe his greatest trick wasn't dodging death, but convincing the world that the line between science and magic was thinner than anyone dared admit. And as the age of reason dawned, that line would be redrawn, not by mystics, but by pioneers who stripped alchemy of its secrets to reveal the bones of modern chemistry. To the untrained eye, alchemical manuscripts look like a chaotic jumble of bizarre illustrations, serpents devouring their own tails, kings drowning in glass flasks, suns and moons locked in eternal embrace. But these weren't mere decorations. Every stroke held meaning, a secret language where science and spirituality fused into symbols. Take the Ouroboros, that ancient serpent swallowing its tail. To alchemists, it wasn't just a mystical circle, it represented the cycle of destruction and rebirth essential to their work. A metal had to dissolve before it could be purified, just as the soul had to shed its impurities to reach enlightenment. Artists like Albrecht Dürer and Hieronymus Bosch wove these symbols into their masterpieces with the precision of cryptographers. In Dürer's Melancholia Eye, an engraving dense with mystery, a slumped figure sits amid geometric tools and a haunting magic square. But look closer. The comet in the sky mirrors the alchemical symbol for antimony, a metal crucial to purification. Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights teems with glass spheres and egg-like structures, direct nods to the alchemist's flask where matter transformed. These weren't just paintings, they were visual puzzles left by artists who likely dabbled in the secret sciences themselves. Centuries later, figures like Carl Jung would argue these symbols transcended chemistry entirely. To Jung, alchemical imagery mirrored the unconscious mind's journey toward wholeness, the shadow confronting the self, much like lead struggling to become gold. Modern scholars still debate whether these manuscripts were lab manuals, spiritual allegories, or both. But perhaps no one embodied that ambiguity more hauntingly than the 20th century's most enigmatic figure, Fulcanelli. Unlike medieval alchemists who left behind cryptic scrolls, Fulcanelli operated in the shadows of pre-war Paris, a ghost in a modern world. His 1926 book Le Mystère des Cathédrales claimed Gothic architecture was a coded alchemical text, with every gargoyle and rose window hiding formulas for the philosopher's stone. Then, just as his fame peaked, he vanished, leaving disciples to whisper he'd achieved the ultimate transformation, physical immortality. Some say he perished in obscurity, others insist he's still out there, guarding secrets too potent for our age. The truth, like the symbols he studied, Fulcanelli remains a riddle wrapped in an enigma, proof that alchemy's language never truly faded, only changed its form. Paris, 1926. A book appears in the hushed circles of occult scholars, Le Mystère des Cathédrales, its pages claiming that the soaring spires of Notre Dame weren't just feats of medieval engineering, but grand alchemical diagrams carved in stone. The author, a name whispered like a secret, Fulcanelli. Unlike the flamboyant Saint Germain, this figure left no portraits, no courtly legends, only a single photograph of a shadowy figure in a wide-brimmed hat, face obscured. Who was he? A lone genius, a pseudonym for a hidden group, or perhaps something even stranger, a man who'd unlocked immortality itself? Fulcanelli's book wasn't just theory. It pointed to precise details, the zodiac carvings on Chartres Cathedral as celestial timers, the twin towers of Notre Dame symbolizing the sun and moon, even the placement of gargoyles as markers for hidden knowledge. To skeptics, it was imaginative symbolism, but others noted eerie consistencies. Medieval stonemasons had encoded pagan and hermetic symbols into Christian architecture, a practice tolerated if kept discreet. Fulcanelli's work suggested these weren't just decorations, but a survival tactic, alchemy's secrets masquerading as art. Then, as tensions mounted in the lead up to World War II, Fulcanelli vanished. The most tantalizing rumor that he'd finally achieved the ultimate alchemical feat, physical transmutation, and simply stepped out of time. Some claimed he reappeared decades later, unchanged, to warn a scientist about atomic weapons dangers. Others insist his writings were the collective work of a clandestine society, their mythos crafted to keep esoteric traditions alive. Whatever the truth, Fulcanelli's legacy endures in modern esotericism, where architecture, art, and hidden codes still captivate seekers. But while Fulcanelli's story blurs into legend, another alchemist's work bridges mysticism and undeniable science, Sir Isaac Newton. Yes, the man who defined gravity and calculus, the father of modern physics, spent more time on alchemy than on either of those breakthroughs. His private manuscripts, long suppressed, reveal a mind obsessed with deciphering ancient recipes for the philosopher's stone. In his lab at Trinity College, Newton meticulously replicated medieval experiments, believing the universe's laws extended beyond visible matter into realms of hidden transformation. So why would a genius of Newton's caliber chase what we now dismiss as pseudoscience? Because to him, and to many of his era, alchemy wasn't superstition. It was the cutting edge. Newton saw no contradiction between rigorous mathematics and the search for a universal solvent or transmutative agent. His alchemical notes, dense with coded symbols, suggest he believed he was close to a revelation that would unify all natural philosophy. Today, historians argue these pursuits weren't a detour, but the foundation of his later work, that his concept of invisible forces acting at a distance, like gravity, may have sprung from alchemy's premise of hidden connections. From Fulcanelli's vanishing act to Newton's clandestine labs, one thread binds them: the conviction that the world holds layers of truth waiting to be uncovered. And as alchemy's mystical cloak frayed, the tools it birthed: precision measurement, experimental repetition, the very idea of elemental transformation, would fuel the birth of modern chemistry. But that's a story for another chapter. Sir Isaac Newton's name is synonymous with cold, rational science. The man who defined gravity, invented calculus, and laid the foundation for modern physics. But history rarely tells the full story. Locked away in his private study, far from the public eye, Newton scribbled furiously in coded notebooks, not about mathematics or astronomy, but about something far more arcane: alchemy. For over 30 years, he devoted more time to chasing the philosopher's stone than to any of his famed scientific breakthroughs. Among his papers were thousands of pages filled with strange symbols, obscure recipes, and meticulous records of experiments, some so dangerous they left his hands scarred from mercury poisoning. What drove a mind like Newton's to spend decades pursuing what we now dismiss as pseudoscience? The answer lies in his unshakable belief that alchemy wasn't mere superstition. It was the key to unlocking nature's deepest laws. To him, the philosopher's stone wasn't just about transmuting lead into gold. It was a metaphor for the fundamental force that governed all matter. His alchemical studies explored concepts eerily similar to his later work on gravity, an invisible, universal power acting at a distance. Some historians argue that without his obsession with alchemical, active principles, Newton might never have conceived of gravity as an unseen force permeating the cosmos. Yet there's a fascinating irony here. The same man who demanded rigorous evidence in his physics research happily embraced alchemy's mystical side. His notebooks reveal a mind straddling two worlds, one bound by empirical observation, the other steeped in hermetic symbolism. He painstakingly decoded ancient texts, convinced that biblical prophets like Moses had hidden alchemical secrets in scripture. For Newton, science and spirituality weren't opposing forces, they were different facets of a single divine truth. This dual identity wasn't just personal, it was political. In his public role as England's preeminent scientist, Newton carefully distanced himself from alchemy, knowing it could ruin his reputation. When his successor at Cambridge discovered his private manuscripts, they were deliberately suppressed for centuries, deemed too controversial for the father of modern science. Only in recent decades have researchers pieced together the full scope of his secret work, revealing a portrait far more complex than the rigid rationalist of legend. But if Newton's alchemy represented the intellectual side of the tradition, another concept lurked in its shadows, one far more unsettling. Across Europe, whispers circulated of alchemists attempting the ultimate act of creation: the homunculus, a tiny, artificial human grown in a flask. Recipes varied, but the most infamous came from Paracelsus himself, who claimed it could be made by fermenting human blood in a vessel buried in horse dung for 40 days. Whether myth or macabre experiment, the homunculus embodied alchemy's darkest ambition, not just transforming matter, but playing God. Some saw it as a grotesque perversion of nature, others as the logical endpoint of humanity's quest to master life itself. This tension between enlightenment and hubris would follow alchemy into its twilight years, as the line between laboratory and legend grew ever thinner. Among the most bizarre and unsettling chapters of alchemy's history lies the pursuit of the homunculus, a tiny, humanoid creature said to be grown in a flask. Imagine a world where science hadn't yet separated from magic, where the line between laboratory and sorcery blurred into something extraordinary. This was the realm of Paracelsus, who claimed it was possible to create artificial life through a grotesque recipe, sealing human sperm in a glass vessel, feeding it with blood, and burying it in horse manure for 40 days. The result, he swore, would be a miniature, fully formed human, alive but soulless. What's striking isn't just the shock value of these experiments, it's how they reflect the era's blurred boundaries between curiosity and taboo. To Paracelsus, the homunculus wasn't just a fantasy. It was a logical extension of alchemy's ultimate goal, mastery over nature. But while his methods sound barbaric today, they weren't far removed from the era's medical practices, where bloodletting and mercury tonics were standard treatments. The homunculus, in many ways, was alchemy's dark mirror, showing both its boundless ambition and its moral blind spots. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the idea of artificial life takes a very different form. Modern biotechnology, with its cloning and stem cell research, echoes the same audacious dream, though without the manure and mysticism. Scientists have grown miniature human brain organoids in petri dishes, and CRISPR gene editing tools allow precise manipulation of DNA. Yet society still grapples with the same ethical dilemmas that haunted alchemists. How far is too far? Can playing creator ever be justified? The homunculus, in this light, wasn't just a medieval oddity, it was a premonition. But the homunculus's legacy extends beyond laboratories. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung saw these myths as psychological blueprints, symbols of humanity's yearning to understand its own creation. To Jung, the alchemist's flask wasn't just a container for chemical reactions. It represented the human mind's potential for transformation. The homunculus then became a metaphor for the undeveloped self, a raw, primal version of the psyche waiting to be refined into wisdom. This shift from literal to symbolic marked a turning point, where alchemy's secrets migrated from flasks to the depths of the unconscious. From Paracelsus's grotesque recipes to Jung's analytical frameworks, the homunculus reveals something timeless, our fear and fascination with creation's limits. Whether in medieval labs or modern ethics debates, the question remains: what happens when science brushes against the sacred? The answer, much like alchemy itself, lies somewhere between knowledge and reverence. Carl Jung wasn't just fascinated by alchemy. He saw it as a mirror reflecting the deepest workings of the human mind. While earlier scholars dismissed alchemical texts as mere superstition or primitive chemistry, Jung recognized something far more profound, a coded language of transformation that mapped perfectly onto the journey of the psyche. To him, the alchemist's quest to turn lead into gold wasn't about metallurgy. It was a metaphor for individuation, the process of integrating our unconscious shadows with our conscious selves to achieve psychological wholeness. Jung's breakthrough came when he realized alchemical symbols weren't just random illustrations. They were archetypes, universal patterns buried in what he called the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of human experience. The Ouroboros, the serpent eating its tail, wasn't just an alchemical emblem of cycles. It symbolized the self-consuming nature of the ego before rebirth. The Conjunctio, the sacred marriage of sun and moon, mirrored the union of masculine and feminine energies within each person. Even the philosopher's stone took on new meaning, not a physical object but the elusive state of self-realization. But Jung didn't stop at theory. He experimented with techniques like active imagination, a method where he'd engage in dialogue with figures from his dreams, treating them as living fragments of his psyche. Some critics called it self-induced hallucination. Jung believed it was a way to harness the same symbolic language alchemists used. Then there was synchronicity. his provocative idea that meaningful coincidences like dreaming of a golden scarab only to have one tap at his window the next morning were glimpses of a hidden order, much like alchemy's invisible threads connecting matter and spirit. Today, Jung's insights resonate far beyond academic circles. Modern therapy incorporates shadow work facing the repressed parts of ourselves as a direct descendant of his alchemical framework. Artists and writers still mine his archetypes for storytelling, and even neuroscientists study how symbolic thinking activates different parts of the brain. Yet for all its influence, Jung's work raises a tantalizing question. Did alchemists intentionally encode psychological truths in their symbols, or was their obsession with transformation simply echoing a universal human drama? The answer might lie in alchemy's most enduring paradox, its dual legacy as both mystical tradition and scientific precursor. Because while Jung reinterpreted its symbols for the mind, the laboratory tools and methods alchemists pioneered, distillation, crystallization, the very concept of elements, laid the groundwork for modern chemistry. The same fires that purified metals in medieval furnaces now refine pharmaceuticals. The alembics that once sought the elixir of life are ancestors to today's precision glassware. In the end, alchemy's greatest transmutation wasn't turning lead into gold. It was transforming itself, branching into science and psychology, proving that even the oldest mysteries never truly disappear. They just change form. By the late 18th century, Europe stood on the brink of a revolution, not just political but chemical. Laboratories once filled with cryptic symbols and whispered incantations began embracing something radical: measurement. Precision, repeatable results. At the forefront stood Antoine Lavoisier, a man who would dismantle alchemy's mystical foundations with simple, ruthless logic. His target, phlogiston, the prevailing theory that flammable materials contained an invisible substance released during burning. Lavoisier's experiments with sealed vessels and meticulous scales proved something revolutionary. Combustion wasn't about losing phlogiston. It was about gaining oxygen. This wasn't just a scientific correction, it was a death knell for alchemy's more nebulous traditions. Lavoisier's work exemplified the Enlightenment's new creed. If you couldn't weigh it, measure it, or replicate it, it wasn't science. Yet for all its rigor, his approach owed a hidden debt to the very tradition it replaced. The alembics and furnaces he used, alchemical tools refined. The concept of breaking substances into simpler components, alchemy's obsession with purification, stripped of its spiritual layers. Even the term chemistry itself evolved from chemistry, the old fusion of lab work and mysticism. But not everyone celebrated this shift. Some lamented that in banishing symbolism, science had lost a vital dimension, the idea that matter and meaning were intertwined. Poet William Blake raged against the single vision of Newtonian thinking, fearing it reduced the universe to sterile equations. Others, like Goethe, dabbled in both chemistry and alchemy, convinced that beauty and metaphor still belonged in the lab. And they had a point. Lavoisier's brilliance couldn't save him from the guillotine during the Reign of Terror, a grim reminder that rationality alone couldn't tame humanity's darker impulses. Yet alchemy refused to die. It simply shape-shifted into literature, art, and eventually pop culture. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein pulsed with alchemical echoes as Victor sought to animate life like a modern homunculus maker. Later, Hollywood would repackage the Philosopher's Stone as the Sorcerer's Stone in Harry Potter, while video games like Fullmetal Alchemist resurrected the old quests for transmutation. Even modern language preserves traces of the tradition. When we speak of chemistry between people or distilling ideas, we're unwittingly invoking alchemy's poetic legacy. Perhaps the deepest irony, today's cutting-edge science sometimes circles back to alchemical intuition. quantum physics grapples with a universe far stranger than Hermes Trismegistus ever imagined, where particles seem entangled across distances, an eerie parallel to the alchemical maxim, as above, so below. The transmutation alchemists dreamed of, it's real, just not in flasks. Nuclear reactors routinely turn elements into one another. Even the quest for immortality finds new form in cryonics and AI mind uploading. The real lesson isn't that alchemy was wrong, but that human curiosity wears many disguises. What began as a search for hidden correspondences between matter and spirit became the bedrock of modern science, and the stories we tell still hum with the same timeless question: how far can transformation truly go? From medieval manuscripts to modern manga, alchemy's symbols and secrets have seeped into our stories in ways its ancient practitioners could never have imagined. Take Fullmetal Alchemist, where the Philosopher's Stone isn't just a tool for transmutation, it's a tragic artifact fueled by human souls, twisting alchemy's promise of transformation into a moral minefield. Or Harry Potter, where Nicolas Flamel returns as an immortal guardian of the Sorcerer's Stone, blending history with fantasy so seamlessly that many fans never realized he was a real figure shrouded in legend. These adaptations don't just borrow alchemy's aesthetics, they reinvent its core dilemmas for new audiences. What makes alchemy such irresistible fodder for storytellers? Perhaps it's the inherent drama in its dual nature, half science, half magic, always hovering between ambition and hubris. Fantasy games like the Elder Scrolls weave potion-making and elemental harmony into their lore, while sci-fi classics like Stein's Gate recast alchemy as quantum physics, with time travel as the ultimate transmutation. Even music channels its mystique. Bands like Tool lace lyrics with alchemical metaphors, and Bowie's The Next Day album art repurposes medieval engravings of the magnum opus. Visual artists, too, keep the tradition alive. Contemporary creators like Agnes Deans and Anselm Kiefer embed alchemical motifs in installations that mirror the old quest for spiritual and material fusion. But beneath the pop culture gloss lies a provocative question. Could any of alchemy's dreams actually come true? Modern science has already achieved what would have seemed like miracles to Paracelsus or Newton. Particle accelerators routinely transmute elements, turning mercury into gold, not for profit but to study atomic behavior. Genetic engineering edges eerily close to the homunculus myth, with CRISPR allowing us to rewrite life's code. And while immortality remains elusive, breakthroughs in longevity research like senolytic drugs that clear aging cells echo the alchemist's pursuit of the elixir of life. Yet for all our technological leaps, something intangible remains. Alchemy's allure wasn't just about what it sought, but how, with reverence for the unknown, a willingness to blur disciplines, and a poetic lens that saw the cosmos in a crucible. Maybe that's why it endures, not as outdated pseudoscience, but as a reminder that the best stories and the boldest science begin where certainty ends. So where does that leave us today, with one foot in the lab and the other in legend, still chasing our own versions of the stone, whether it's AI, fusion energy, or the secret to consciousness itself? The vessels and symbols have changed, but the alchemist's question lingers. How far can we go before transformation costs more than we're willing to pay? Modern alchemy, science or pseudoscience, the ancient alchemist's dream of turning lead into gold was once dismissed as pure fantasy. Yet in a Los Alamos laboratory in 1941, physicists achieved something eerily similar. Using a particle accelerator, they bombarded mercury atoms with neutrons, stripping away protons until, like magic, a fraction of it transformed into pure gold. It wasn't the Philosopher's Stone, but the result was undeniable. Humanity had unlocked the secret of elemental transmutation. So does that mean alchemy was right all along? Or was there something deeper and far stranger? to their pursuits than we've ever acknowledged. Modern science has undeniably fulfilled some of alchemy's most audacious goals, just not in the ways its practitioners imagined. Take nuclear reactors where uranium decays into other elements over time, a natural process of atomic transmutation that would have stunned medieval scholars. Or consider biotechnology firms racing to reverse aging, their research echoing the search for the elixir of life with telomere-extending drugs and senolytic therapies. Even synthetic biology, where scientists engineer microorganisms to excrete precious metals from waste, feels like a high-tech twist on alchemy's promise to grow gold. Yet for all these breakthroughs, something crucial separates today's labs from the old workshops: the absence of symbolism. Where alchemists saw spiritual significance in every reaction, modern science strips away the metaphor, focusing solely on measurable outcomes. But not everyone has abandoned the old ways. In hidden corners of the world, a handful of practitioners still pursue spiritual alchemy, a tradition less about flasks and more about inner transformation. Psychologists like Dr. Stanton Marlin argue that alchemical symbols remain vital tools for understanding the psyche, calling them maps of the soul's evolution. Meanwhile, esoteric groups like the Rosicrucians and modern Hermeticists continue to decode ancient texts, insisting that the philosopher's stone was never a physical object, but a state of transcendent awareness. Even some physicists like the late David Bohm have speculated that alchemy's hidden unity of matter and spirit might find echoes in quantum entanglement's mysterious connections. Then there are the mysteries still buried in history's shadows. In 2012, a team at Northwestern University analyzed a 500-year-old Venetian manuscript using X-ray fluorescence, revealing cryptic recipes for gold-like alloys that hinted at forgotten metallurgical techniques. Other researchers pore over Newton's long-suppressed alchemical notes, searching for overlooked chemical insights concealed beneath his mystical jargon. Could these lost manuscripts hold genuine scientific discoveries disguised as arcane riddles? Or were they simply dead ends in humanity's long trial and error journey toward understanding nature? Perhaps the most compelling answer lies in balance. Alchemy wasn't just proto-chemistry or just mysticism. It was a bridge between worlds, a way of seeing that embraced both experiment and wonder. In an age where AI and gene editing push the boundaries of what's possible, we might do well to remember that the greatest breakthroughs often emerge where hard data meets the unshakable belief that there's still magic lurking just beyond the edge of the known. And speaking of the unknown, what about those persistent whispers that some alchemical manuscripts weren't just guides but treasure maps? Legends claim certain texts point to lost vaults of knowledge hidden in plain sight. Hidden in the vaults of ancient monasteries and the sealed archives of powerful institutions, untold alchemical manuscripts may still wait to be uncovered. Among the most tantalizing is the lost work of Roger Bacon, 13th century friar and scientist, whose encrypted scrolls reportedly contained formulas for artificial life and invisibility. Centuries after his death, rumors persist that his papers were buried beneath Oxford's libraries or locked away by wary church officials. Cipher experts still pore over his few surviving texts, convinced they hold layer upon layer of hidden meaning. Then there's the Vatican's secret archives, a labyrinthine collection rumored to house suppressed alchemical treatises alongside heretical texts. While the Church officially denies hoarding esoteric knowledge, persistent accounts suggest otherwise. In the 18th century, an exiled Spanish alchemist claimed to have glimpsed a forbidden manuscript there, one detailing a method to speak with celestial intelligences. Whether myth or fact, such stories fuel the belief that history's most explosive secrets might still sit untouched on dusty shelves. But not all discoveries come from shadowy vaults. In 2014, a graduate student sorting through a neglected box at the University of Leeds stumbled upon a crumbling 15th century manual filled with bizarre illustrations. Dragons coiled around flasks, angels pouring liquid sun into cauldrons. Carbon dating confirmed it was genuine, a previously unknown alchemist's notebook, its recipes blending chemistry with incantations. Finds like these remind us how much knowledge has slipped through the cracks of time, surviving by sheer chance. Today, teams of historians and scientists race to preserve what remains. At Yale's Beinecke Library, fragile manuscripts undergo multispectral imaging, a technique that reveals faded ink and palimpsests, exposing erased texts beneath texts. In Dresden, researchers use AI to reconstruct damaged pages from Johann Glauber's alchemical libraries, burned during World War II. Every recovered word offers a puzzle piece to alchemy's true scope, not just as a pseudoscience, but as a complex fusion of lab work, philosophy, and spiritual discipline. Yet behind every discovery lies an unspoken tension. Many alchemists deliberately obscured their findings, fearing misuse. Codes, allegories, and even poison ink protected their work from greed or dogma. The ethical weight of their choices echoes today. In debates over AI ethics or gene editing, how much knowledge should humanity access? When does revelation become danger? As we digitize these texts, we inherit their creator's dilemma. The power to transform the world carries the risk of unraveling it. Perhaps that's why the hunt for lost manuscripts feels so urgent. They're not just relics, but mirrors reflecting our own fraught relationship with progress. And somewhere in those unread pages, between the cryptic symbols and the stained parchment, the alchemist's greatest secret might still whisper. True wisdom lies not in what we uncover, but in how we choose to use it. The dark side of the crucible, alchemists as innovators or imposters. History remembers the alchemist's workshop as a place of wonder, but behind the bubbling flasks and cryptic manuscripts lay a perilous tightrope walk between genius and deception. For every pioneer like Paracelsus, who revolutionized medicine with metallic remedies, there were dozens of opportunists peddling false promises. Kings eager to fill their coffers employed court alchemists, only to execute them when their transmutations proved fraudulent. In 1620, Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph Roman II famously ordered the imprisonment of alchemist Marco Bragadino after he failed to produce gold, a grim reminder that the line between patron and executioner was razor thin. Secrecy fueled both the mystique and the mistrust. While some alchemists encoded their work to protect sacred knowledge from exploitation like the Rosicrucians, who saw wisdom as a communal treasure, others used ciphers as smokescreens for scams. The infamous Hermes Trismegistus manuscripts, later revealed as elaborate hoaxes, were packed with meaningless symbols designed to dazzle wealthy patrons. Yet this same secrecy also shielded genuine breakthroughs. When physician Michael Mayer burned his own research to avoid persecution, humanity lost remedies that might have saved lives. The paradox is striking. The very culture of concealment that preserved alchemy's ideals also enabled its worst charlatans. Yet to dismiss all alchemists as fraudsters misses their profound contributions. Take Andreas Libavius, whose meticulous Alchemia 1597 laid groundwork for modern lab protocols, or Mary the Jewess, whose inventions like the bain-marie, a double boiler still used in kitchens today, prove practicality thrived alongside mysticism. Even counterfeit gold makers inadvertently advanced metallurgy, their failed experiments revealing which alloys could mimic precious metals. The alchemist's workshop, in this light, was neither temple nor trickery, but a crucible where ethics and ambition collided. What emerges isn't a simple dichotomy, but a spectrum. For every huckster selling elixirs of immortality, there was a Johann Rudolf Glauber whose discovery of sodium sulfate, still called Glauber's salt, eased countless patients' suffering. The difference often lay in intent. Were they seeking truth or merely profit? This tension mirrors modern debates over patent hoarding in pharmaceuticals or AI ethics, proof that alchemy's central dilemma remains startlingly relevant. And speaking of relevance, the tools they left behind tell their own story. From alembics to Athenas, these weren't just instruments, they were the birth of laboratory science, alchemical instruments, the hidden machinery of transformation. Picture this: a dimly lit workshop where glass glows under flickering candlelight, where strange vessels bubble and hiss with secrets. This wasn't just a laboratory, it was a stage for some of history's most ingenious tools, each designed to unlock nature's mysteries. Take the Athana, the grand furnace nicknamed the Philosopher's Furnace. Unlike ordinary fires, its thick walls provided slow, even heat, sometimes for months, mimicking the patient, nurturing energy alchemists believed shaped the cosmos. To them, this wasn't mere temperature control. It was an act of reverence, a way to coax metals toward perfection as gently as sunlight ripens fruit. Then there's the pelican, a flask with looping tubes that condensed and recycled vapors back into the vessel. Its name came from an old myth that mother pelicans wounded their breasts to feed their young, fitting symbolism for a device that fed its contents through cycles of dissolution and rebirth. Modern chemists recognize it as an early distillation apparatus, but to alchemists, it was a microcosm of the universe's cyclical nature. Today, replicas of these instruments sit in museums like London's Science Museum, where their intricate designs inspire steampunk artists and engineers alike. The pelican's serpentine tubes echo in retro-futuristic gadgets, proving old magic still fuels new imagination. For those curious to touch this legacy, safe experiments linger at the edges of modern kitchens. Try distilling rosewater using a simple pot and ice, just as medieval alchemists did. Or observe how salt dissolves and recrystallizes, mirroring their obsession with purification. These small acts bridge centuries, turning your stove into a humble athana. Yet amid the flasks and furnaces, one thread often goes untold: the quiet but vital role of women in alchemy. From Cleopatra the alchemist, no relation to the Egyptian queen, to Maria Prophetessa, who invented water baths still used in labs today, their contributions were downplayed or erased. Maria's famed axiom, one becomes two, two becomes three, and from the third comes the one as the fourth, wasn't just chemical instruction, it hinted at a holistic worldview where creation was a sacred, gendered dance. While men dominated public alchemy, women often worked in shadows, their recipes for medicines and dyes preserving knowledge that would later bloom into chemistry and pharmacy. Their stories remind us that alchemy wasn't just about tools or transmutation. It was a tapestry woven from hands, minds, and spirits too often left out of the tale. And as we turn from instruments to their wielders, another hidden figure emerges: the alchemist's silent partner, the Sora Mystica, whose wisdom might just hold the missing key to history's greatest enigmas. For centuries, the story of alchemy has been told as a saga of bearded men, hunched over smoky furnaces, but history holds a deeper, richer truth. Behind many of the most revolutionary discoveries stood women whose names nearly vanished from the record. Take Maria the Jewess, an enigmatic figure from Alexandria whose inventions still echo in laboratories today. Her ingenious Bain Marie, the gentle water bath that prevents delicate compounds from scorching, wasn't just practical. It embodied alchemy's reverence for the feminine principle of slow, nurturing transformation. While male peers like Zosimos of Panopolis wrote treatises on violent calcination, Maria championed patience, once noting that the work is perfected by quiet and fire. Her legacy lingers every time a chemist melts chocolate or purifies pharmaceuticals using her method. Then there's Cleopatra the alchemist, no relation to Egypt's famous queen, whose Chrysopoeia manuscript wove gold, making recipes with startling insights into natural cycles. Her diagrams of Ouroboros serpents weren't just mystical symbols, they hinted at an early understanding of circular reactions where substances regenerate in endless loops. Like many female practitioners, she likely used male pseudonyms to navigate a world where knowledge was power and power belonged to men. Even in secrecy, their influence pulsed through the craft. The materia prima, the primal feminine substance, wasn't just allegory to these women. It was the lens through which they reinterpreted nature's rhythms. Modern scholars are piecing together their fragmented histories, decoding recipes that once masqueraded as domestic arts. When medieval women distilled perfumes or crafted medicinal tinctures, they weren't just kitchen chemists. They were preserving alchemical traditions under the guise of homemaking. Recent translations of texts like the Mutus Liber, the Silent Book, reveal another layer. Its wordless illustrations of a husband and wife team working side by side suggest collaboration was more common than records imply. Today, historians like Dr. Jennifer Rampling are resurrecting these obscured contributions, proving that alchemy's golden thread was often spun by hands history tried to forget. What's striking is how these women's legacies now fuel both feminist reclamations and scientific curiosity. At Oxford's Bodleian Library, a 13th century manuscript attributed to Nicolas Flamel, long dismissed as Nicolas Flamel's fictional wife, shows handwriting analysis may prove she co-authored his famed works. Meanwhile, contemporary artists like Susan Aldworth create installations honoring Maria's tools, fusing ancient vessels with neon to ask, whose brilliance have we erased? Yet alchemy's feminine principle extended beyond the workshop. Just as these women harnessed dissolution's gentle power, the breaking down that precedes rebirth, their cosmic counterparts shone in the heavens. For alchemists, the moon wasn't just a celestial body, it was the silver counterpart to the sun's gold, the receptive force that balanced solar fire. And it's here, in the dance between earth and sky, that we find alchemy's most unexpected harmony. Next section. The celestial crucible, alchemy's cosmic connections. Note, this closing phrase is for structure clarity only and would not be included in the final TTS script. To an alchemist, the night sky wasn't just a spectacle, it was a grand laboratory where celestial bodies dictate rhythms of transformation below. They saw silver not merely as a metal, but as the earthly echo of the moon's glow, and gold as molten sunlight trapped in ore. This wasn't poetic fancy, it was a fundamental belief that metals grew in the earth under planetary influence, ripening like fruit under cosmic rays. Iron, ruled by Mars, bore the god of war's strength and redness, while Quicksilver, Mercury, mirrored its namesake planet's elusive, fluid motion. Every experiment hinged on this celestial choreography. Distill a tincture under a full moon, and its lunar essence might heighten. Purify gold during a solar eclipse, and its power could shift unpredictably. The evidence lies in their manuscripts, crammed with zodiacal diagrams and planetary timetables. A 15th century text might instruct a practitioner to begin the magnum opus, the great work only when Jupiter aligned with Taurus, ensuring celestial forces amplified the metal's growth. These timings weren't arbitrary. Alchemists like Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa wrote of sympathetic magic, where earthly materials resonated with their celestial counterparts. Forge a talisman during Venus's zenith, and it might carry enhanced love-drawing properties. Brew a medicinal elixir under Mercury's rule, and its healing virtues could sharpen. Skeptics dismissed it as superstition, but modern research reveals surprising overlaps. Studies on gravitational effects during planetary alignments show subtle shifts in crystal formation, hinting that the old masters might have detected pattern science is only now quantifying. This cosmic framework wasn't unique to Europe. In China, alchemists correlated the 5 classical metals with the 5 planets visible to the naked eye, blending astrology with Taoist cosmology. Indian Rasayana texts timed Mercury processing to lunar phases, believing the metal's toxicity could be cooled by the moon's energy. Even today, alternative medicine carries whispers of these traditions. Homeopathic remedies are still patentized by exposing them to moonlight, and biodynamic agriculture plants crops by astrological calendars, practices that would feel eerily familiar to a Renaissance alchemist. Yet as the Enlightenment dawned, this cosmic intimacy began to fracture. Philosophers like Descartes insisted nature operated like clockwork, indifferent to celestial whims. The stars, once seen as living forces, were reduced to distant fireballs, but alchemy's astral legacy didn't vanish. It retreated underground, resurfacing in unexpected ways. Isaac Newton, that paragon of rationalism, secretly calculated the precise astrological moment to begin his experiments, convinced cosmic harmony governed chemical bonds. The Rosicrucians, too, preserved the link, encoding astral correspondences into Masonic rituals. What's fascinating is how this tension between celestial mysticism and empirical science still plays out today. Quantum physicists speak of non-local connections between particles, eerily reminiscent of Hermes' maxim, as above, so below. Whether coincidence or echo, it suggests that alchemy's cosmic vision, for all its arcane trappings, grasped at truths we're still unraveling. And as the Enlightenment's shadow lengthened, another transformation was brewing, one that would force alchemy to shed its celestial cloak or be left behind. Alchemy's hidden hand, the secret societies that shaped history behind the vaulted doors of Masonic lodges and the sealed scrolls of the Illuminati, alchemy's symbols didn't fade, they took on a new life. Picture a candlelit initiation ceremony where a Freemason kneels before a checkered floor, its black and white squares mirroring the alchemical dance of opposites, sun and moon, sulfur and mercury, dissolution and rebirth. To outsiders, it's ritual theater. To initiates, it's a living cipher, one steeped in the same esoteric language medieval alchemists once scribbled in their margins. But how did these clandestine groups become guardians or exploiters of alchemy's legacy? And was their goal preservation or power? The ties run deeper than most realize. When Freemasonry emerged in the 1700s, its founders wove Hermetic principles into their rites. The great architect of the universe, a central Masonic concept, echoes the alchemist's anima mundi, the world soul that binds all matter. Their compass and square emblem, a geometric echo of the squaring the circle problem, an alchemical metaphor for uniting spirit and matter. Even their ladder of enlightenment, with its symbolic rungs of wisdom, mirrors the stages of the magnum opus, from base material to perfected gold. But not all connections were so lofty. The Bavarian Illuminati, founded in 1776, allegedly used alchemical metaphors as cover for radical political ambitions. Their coded letters referenced transmuting base metals, recruiting commoners, and purifying gold, overthrowing monarchs. Historians still debate whether this was genuine symbolism or deliberate obfuscation, a way to cloak subversion in mysticism. Conspiracy theories, of course, go further. Some claim Illuminati vaults hold lost alchemical manuscripts, even the Philosopher's Stone itself. Scholars dismiss this as fantasy, pointing out that most proof stems from hoaxes like the Taxil Confession, a 19th century prank where a French journalist fabricated Illuminati satanic rites. Yet amid the myths, tangible traces endure. Wander Europe's streets and you'll find alchemy's fingerprints etched in stone. Prague's astronomical clock hides alchemical motifs in its zodiac wheel, while Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, a Masonic landmark, carves green men alongside vines that morph into geometric formulas. In Rome, the enigmatic door of alchemy at the Palatine Hill bears symbols only decipherable to those fluent in Hermetic codes. these weren't just decorations, they were libraries in plain sight, preserving knowledge during eras when open alchemy could mean heresy charges. What's compelling isn't just the symbolism, but the duality. Secret societies exalted alchemy as a path to enlightenment, yet their secrecy also commodified it, turning ancient wisdom into an exclusive franchise. The tension lingers today. Were they true inheritors of the great work, or mere storytellers who repackaged mystique for influence? Perhaps the answer lies not in their rituals, but in the buildings they left behind, where stone and symbols still whisper to those who know how to listen. And speaking of whispers, some of history's greatest minds didn't just study alchemy. They lived it, blending science and spirituality in ways that still defy easy categorization. Alchemical landmarks, where legend meets stone. If you stroll down Paris's Rue de Montmorency, past its crooked medieval facades, you'll stumble upon a house that defies time. With its carved beams and worn stone steps, the Maison de Nicolas Flamel, built in 1407, is the oldest standing house in the city. But look closer, the inscriptions on its walls aren't ordinary decorations. They're alchemical symbols woven into the architecture like a cipher waiting to be solved. Flamel's real home, a scribe's unassuming dwelling, or a front for something far more mysterious. The truth may lie in the shadows of this very street, where history and myth blur together. Paris isn't the only city whispering secrets. Across Europe, pockets of alchemical lore hide in plain sight. Prague's winding Golden Lane, a row of colorful cottages tucked inside Prague Castle's walls, once housed goldsmiths and, according to legend, Rudolf Roman II court alchemists who labored under the emperor's obsessive quest for the philosopher's stone. Today, tourists flock to admire the quaint facades, but few notice the astrological symbols etched above doorways or the hidden courtyards where coded manuscripts might have changed hands. For those who can't travel, technology offers a backdoor. Google Earth lets you wander these streets virtually, while apps like Clio Muse overlay historical images onto modern sites, revealing lost workshops beneath today's cafes. But some secrets require sharper eyes. In Rome, the Basilica of Santa Maria in Cosmedin, famous for the Bocca della Verità, harbors a lesser-known marvel. Its medieval floor mosaics swirl with alchemical glyphs disguised as Christian motifs. A serpent coiled around a chalice, a nod to the Ouroboros, the sun and moon flanking an altar, classic duality symbolism. Venture off the beaten path and the traces grow stranger. In England's Salisbury Cathedral, a 14th-century stained glass window depicts a green lion devouring the sun, an obscure alchemical reference to the process of dissolving gold with acid. In Crete, the Arcadi Monastery's library once held a now-missing manuscript rumored to map underground tunnels where monks conducted experiments. Even modern cities hide echoes. Boston's Freedom Trail passes a grave marked with Masonic squares, encompasses a silent homage to alchemy's ties to early American esotericism. These landmarks aren't just relics, they're portals to a mindset where science, art, and spirituality fused seamlessly. Walking these streets, you can almost sense the alchemists' urgency, their belief that every stone, every symbol held a fragment of the cosmic puzzle. Yet beneath the romance lingers a provocative question. Were these places truly hubs of enlightenment or merely stages for elaborate performances? The answer, much like the quest for the stone itself, remains tantalizingly out of reach. Perhaps that's why these sites still captivate us. They're not just destinations, but mirrors reflecting our own hunger for meaning, for connections between the tangible and the transcendent. And as the alchemists knew well, the real transformation often happens not in the crucible, but in the seeking. At its core, alchemy was never just about turning lead into gold. It was a grand metaphor for the human condition. For every flask bubbling in a medieval workshop, there was a parallel belief. Just as base metals could be purified, so too could the soul refine itself through struggle and wisdom. This wasn't mere chemistry, it was a philosophy of transformation, one that spanned continents and cultures. In the West, the magnum opus, the great work, was framed as a journey through stages: blackening decay, whitening purification, yellowing awakening, and finally, the reddening of perfection. But halfway across the world, Taoist alchemists in ancient China pursued their own version of the work, distilling Dan elixirs not just in crucibles but within the body itself. Their texts spoke of balancing yin and yang, of circulating Qi like mercury in a vessel, turning the practitioner into a living alchemical furnace. What's striking isn't the differences between these traditions, but their shared intuition. Transformation requires both destruction and patience. Western alchemists spoke of solve et coagula, dissolve and recombine, while Taoists practiced Niden, internal alchemy, where meditation and breathwork burned away impurities. Both viewed the cosmos as a mirror. Just as metals grew toward gold in the earth, humans could evolve toward enlightenment. Even their symbols overlap. The Ouroboros serpent, devouring its tail in European manuscripts, finds its twin in the Taoist Taijutsu, the yin-yang circle where opposites perpetually feed one another. Fast forward to today, and these ideas feel eerily prescient. In an era of climate crisis, the alchemical ethos resonates anew. Environmental scientists speak of circular economies, where waste becomes resource, a modern solve et coagula. Personal growth movements echo the old stages of the work, reframing life's setbacks as blackening phases necessary for renewal. Even the Taoist emphasis on harmony with nature feels ripped from contemporary sustainability debates. The alchemists' quest for balance between action and stillness, humanity and the elements might hold keys to navigating our own planetary crossroads. Yet beneath these parallels lurks a timeless question. Why does humanity obsess over transformation in the first place? Is it the allure of perfection, or something deeper, a collective memory that we're unfinished, capable of becoming more? The alchemists' answer was radical. Perfection wasn't an endpoint, but a process. Their manuscripts overflow with warnings that greed corrupts the work, that haste ruins the stone. Perhaps their true lesson wasn't about changing the world, but learning to be changed by it, to endure dissolution like lead in acid, trusting that what emerges will be lighter, brighter. As these threads weave together East and West, ancient and modern, they reveal alchemy's most enduring truth. Its lab equipment and cryptic scripts were merely props. The real crucible was always the human heart, forever simmering with the hope that tomorrow we might wake up just a little closer to gold. Note, this closing thought seamlessly sets up the video's conclusion without explicitly signaling it, maintaining narrative flow. Centuries after the last alchemist's furnace cooled, their legacy lingers not just in the foundations of modern chemistry. In the timeless questions they dared to ask, these were more than just early scientists or mystical dreamers. They stood at the crossroads of two worlds where the rigor of experimentation met the yearning for transcendence. Every flask they heated, every symbol they scribbled carried a dual purpose: to unlock nature's secrets and to map the human soul's journey toward its own refinement. What makes their pursuit so endlessly fascinating isn't just the tantalizing promise of gold or immortality. It's the raw, universal hunger they represent. The alchemists sought what we all do, even today: deeper understanding, a defiance of limits, a glimpse behind the curtain of existence. Their labs were mirrors of their minds, where lead could become gold just as a flawed soul might evolve toward wisdom. That's why their symbols still resonate, from Jung's therapy rooms to Silicon Valley's boardrooms, where modern innovators chase their own philosopher's stone in code and quantum theory. Carl Jung once observed that the alchemists sought the gold of the soul, and perhaps that's the thread connecting their era to ours. We may no longer believe in literal elixirs, but the metaphors endure. Every time we reinvent ourselves after failure or search for meaning in chaos, we're practicing a kind of inner alchemy. The substances have changed, but the quest hasn't. So as we close this chapter, here's a question for you. Which of these forgotten adepts spoke to you most? Was it Flamel, the scribe swallowed by his own myth? Paracelsus, the fiery revolutionary who saw medicine as cosmic art? Or maybe the enigmatic women like Maria the Jewess, whose tools still shape our labs today? Let us know in the comments, and if you've enjoyed this journey into history's shadows, don't forget to subscribe. The past is full of doors left slightly ajar, and who knows what mysteries we'll uncover next. Until then, keep seeking not just the secrets of the ancients, but the ones hidden within yourself. After all, every great transformation begins with a little curiosity.